watching Interface here on SABC3. Good evening to you. A warm welcome. My name is Thembisa Machele. Well, 18 years into our democracy, the media and government are still sometimes at loggerheads over the freedom of the press and access to information. As the media, government and the public debate over the Protection of State Information Bill, tonight on Interface we ask, is press freedom still under threat? And joining us to talk about this is editor of The Star, Makhuru Safara, and also member of the Ad Hoc Committee on the Protection of State Information Bill, Tunka Matila, as well as William Bird, who is the Executive Director at Media Monitoring Africa. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us, and welcome to you. We're hearing about the secrecy bill and how we're going back to the dark days of apartheid. William, is it really that bad?
No, I don't think by a long shot is it that bad. To compare us to an apartheid state, I think is probably an example of scaremongering. To suggest, however, that there are some very real and very deeply problematic bills and potential bills and pieces of legislation is accurate. To say that there are problems with the Protection of State Information Bill, that it is in its current form unconstitutional, is probably also very accurate. And to also say that there's a lot of good in that bill is also accurate. I think we need some more nuance in it. To say that we're going back to an apartheid state doesn't really help anyone understand what the issues are.
Makhuru, should we be calling it the secrecy bill as the media? Are we right to do that?
Yeah, I think we are. I think it's a bill that relates to the State Security Department, which is formerly known as intelligence, that had a component of South African Secret Service. But essentially it's a bill that deals with the need for the state to keep certain information secret. And there is that need. That should be acknowledged. And as William said, there are very good things in the bill, and there are others that are very problematic. You know, the fact that there's no public interest clause, for example, that is hugely problematic. If you look at what's happening with the criminal justice cluster in the country at the moment, reports of corruption coming out of there and people looting the slush fund suggests that the people that the state has entrusted with the responsibility to secure the state and keep certain information secret can't be trusted.
Okay. Tunka, both of these gentlemen admit and acknowledge that there is a need to protect some information, but at the same time, you can't then put a blanket on all information and withhold certain things that are critical to the public. What are your thoughts?
I don't think that is the intention of the bill. You know, at present, we've got a bill, an act that has been protecting a lot of information and unnecessary information. Because this bill will open and make sure that there are areas around land that have been protected in that particular bill, in that particular act. That must come to the open. That is the first area. The second area is that the intention of this particular bill is to make sure that, like any other country internationally, that we are able to protect the interest of the South African citizens.
Yeah.
And that is the aim of the bill.
So, Makhuru, this is something that happens in every country. You know, every government will protect certain kinds of information. Why are we kicking up such a fuss about it in South Africa?
No, that it's not the intention of the bill or the act which has been repealed at the moment. You know, it's neither here nor there. The issue for us is that there's, I think for me, one particular clause that's missing from the bill, which would really create a very untenable situation in the country. Now, I mean, I can give you an example of what we've had to deal with very quickly.
Yeah.
As the editor of the Sunday Independent. We received information that there's corruption at crime intelligence, that state houses, what the intelligence community will call safe houses, are being abused that jobs are being given to people who are related to people who are in management at crime intelligence, and that funds are being given, people have been registered as sources even when there's no proof that they provide any credible information or any information that is of any use to the state. We published a series of these claims about 2 years ago, but it is interesting that the current head of crime intelligence, Richard Ndluli, is the guy who actually ran to court, to the Pretoria High Court, to gag the Sunday Independent. And of course he was supported by the suspended police commissioner, Begitel. And said to us, we are being sensationalist, we are being alarmist, there's no corruption that's going on at crime intelligence. But today, it is in fact some of the people who are at crime intelligence who have written reports saying that the senior guys that you have at crime intelligence are actually corrupt. So the leadership of crime intelligence and the police used the Protection of Information Act, which has been repealed now, which is going to be replaced by this bill, to gag us.
Good point. Tunka, what Makhura is saying is that if we did not have the freedom to publish that, South Africans would not have known what was going on, would have had the wool pulled over our eyes. Surely the ANC acknowledges that. No.
The point that the ANC did not implement this particular act that is there. No? Because it was there from apartheid. Because we acknowledge that there are problems, and we're the first organization in this country that said, let us deal with corruption. Because we are aware that the Broeder Bond was corrupt. We're aware that the police force was corrupt. That everything, that's what happened in apartheid.
So under the
how
new
do we
bill,
clean it?
Under the new bill, how would you clean it and make sure that we do get these stories?
You must not forget that we have the information bill that came with the ANC to say information is important. We need to make sure that we get this information. That is the information bill, you see. But also, we must also not be reckless. A few years ago, the same media, and a clear example is what happened in Iraq. Somebody just sold information for people to be killed in Iraq. So this thing nearly happened in this country when people were saying there were few individuals within the ANC that want to take over the leadership. And what would have happened if members of the defense, whatever, of MK, then went in and then, then there was a coup. What would have happened? Would the media have said sorry to that? Because people have been killed in Iraq now as we speak, and because of the recklessness of the media to report this thing.
Is that a fair point? Media is so reckless that we do need to have extra checks and balances being put in place by the state.
But let's not confuse the Protection of State Information Bill, which is primarily about information, and some of its limiting clauses, with a desire to ensure that our media do a better job. Do our media make errors and mistakes? Yes, they do. Do they get things wrong? Do they cause harm sometimes? Yes, they do. But that's a very different thing from this Protection of State Information Bill, which I think there are two deeply concerning things about it that do make it unconstitutional. The one is that it goes against South Africa's own perceived role as a leader and a progressive leader on the continent. It goes against our African Union obligations, our various treaties, in terms of creating openness and transparency and providing and encouraging access to information instead of limiting it. And there are various charters that we've signed onto and various principles that we've signed that this bill in its current form would appear to violate. What it does more concerningly is it undermines the precedence of the Promotion of Access to Information Act, which my colleague referred to just a moment ago. That act is part and parcel of our constitutional democracy.
But
and is
how do we
vital
walk
to
this fine line? You've got Makhura here saying public interest, and how do we stop him and his colleagues in the media from using that line to justify things that they are doing wrong in the media? That's the one hand. On the other hand, you've got government, ANC-led, saying, you guys are reckless, you're doing this all wrong, we need to put these checks and balances in place. And yet, how do we stop them from hiding information that's crucial to the public?
Well, I think our government has a constitutional imperative which they've committed themselves to in a number of areas, most recently in the Open Government Partnership, that says they're promoting open governance, that says they should promote and encourage access to as much information as possible. That as against information which is, and it's very limited information, that is necessary for the security of the state. So, of course, I don't think that Makhura would suggest for a moment that they should be publishing information that might cause harm to particular police investigations. If they do that, they should be prosecuted under the law where they violate those basic provisions. But that's a very fundamentally different thing to wanting to expose corruption. And in fact, the intention of our democracy and certainly of our current legislation is that those kinds of acts should be protected where you expose corruption. And as Mr. Matila said, you know, those are the things that our government has spoken about supporting. So I think this bill in its current form, with some minor amendments, could in fact be a piece of legislation that continues to see South Africa being a guiding light on the continent.
But you know, the point I wanted to
Okay, I'll give you a second just now. Yes.
Can I just clarify one thing?
Yeah.
Mr. Matila here said the Information Protection Act as we have it now was not introduced by the ANC, which is correct. But what we are saying as the media and as interested parties is that that Protection of Information Act that was introduced by the apartheid regime does not have the public interest clause. And we are saying if you want to be different to the apartheid era government, put that in, and if you do that, you help us to expose people who are rotten, who engage in corrupt acts within the police. And it can be in the interest of the ANC government to protect those sort of people.
Okay, fair point.
No, we've made it very clear that we want corruption to be dealt with. You know, we've made it very clear.
Yeah.
You see, we had public hearings. You know? One thing that does not come out very clear from civil society, I mean, I asked Vavi, what do you mean by public interest? Because, you know, we were given an example about Canada. Yeah? And that's what they're raising. What we have in the bill is exactly what Canada has.
Okay.
It's exactly what Canada, because you have a minister, you have a judge. No? It is not easy. It's not easy to access that particular process. You must go through a process.
There's serious disagreement to that, but we're going to have to take a short break. When we come back, we'll pick that up. Is this really the way we should be going as a country? You give us your thoughts, 33726 on SMS or on our Facebook page. Stay with us. Welcome back to Interface here on SABC3, and you are watching us talking about press freedom with the editor of the Star newspaper, Makhura Safara, and also member of the Ad Hoc Committee on the Protection of State Information Bill, Mr. Tunka Matila, as well as Mr. William Bird, who is the Executive Director at Media Monitoring Africa. Would you concede, though, that there are so many mistakes that are being made in the media, so many things being written that should not be written about individuals, where if something gets published and it's wrong, very little gets done about it? It's, as they say at the bottom of page 69, you know, that's the retraction or whatever it is you've got there, that we do need to regulate the industry better?
No, I mean, I don't think you're going to find any editor in the country who says that there are no mistakes that are being made in newspapers. Newspapers are being manned by human beings who are fallible, make mistakes, you know.
Yeah.
But the question is what's being done by the mistakes, what's being done to correct those mistakes. You know, there's a process at the moment that's being undertaken by the Office of the Ombudsman to strengthen the office. There's another process that's spearheaded by the Press Freedom Commission, headed by the former Chief Justice Lang. Now, for me, the issue is, if, depending on the mistakes, because you know this would vary from one newspaper and one incident to another. There are quite a number of mechanisms, and these have been strengthened, as I say, to correct this. You've seen newspapers in recent days putting front page apologies. given that we concede that there are mistakes that are being made, and we're not the only ones who make mistakes. The ANC government itself, people are out in the streets doing because some people are not doing what they are employed to do in government. The ANC itself is involved in its own internal wars, and there are many other battles in various spheres of society. Now, the question for me is whether the response that has been put on the table to exclude the public interest clause there and to suggest a media appeals tribunal are in fact the right way of dealing with the challenges as we have them. And, I think not.
Okay. What's wrong with putting a public interest clause in there and saying, look, if it is in the public interest, that's fine, you can go ahead and print that without any ramifications?
We have said in the public hearings, because as the NCOP, we are not a rubber stamp structure. No? Therefore, come forward and assist us to deal with some of the areas, the concerns you're raising. Give us clear areas, because we see, in most cases, what they wanted to happen is to give them a blank check.
No, but what he's saying is...
No, I'm saying this is what we had in the public hearings.
But are you happy with what's come out of that?
No.
What the industry is saying it'll put in place?
We don't have a problem with that. We agree with that, because we want them to assist us to deal with other problems that are there in society.
Okay.
You see, we agree with that. The point we're raising is we can't be giving a blanket check, a blank check now, you see, because what we had in some, the one structure that came there indicated that no, they want the press to regulate itself, to do anything on its own, and we said it's wrong.
But let's just stick to this issue. William, would a public interest clause mean that the media has a blank check?
No, I don't believe that it would. I think that you have to be able to show a demonstrable public interest. That means you have to show that it's something that is information that should be in the public realm, or it should be in the domain of citizens, that will help them and help our government ultimately fulfill their mandate in terms of open, transparent governance. And that kind of thing isn't going to go against what should happen. So,
Okay.
But we must caution against mixing where media make errors, and they do make errors, against this Protection of State Information Bill. The Protection of State Information Bill, by and large, doesn't have very much to do with media. It's only in those very few clauses where it talks about publishing or possessing or releasing.
But those are the contentious
classified
aspects of that
information.
bill. And I'm asking the question, if, as William is saying, the media will take responsibility and say, we are going to prove that this is in the public interest, why is the ANC opposed to having that clause there?
We're not opposed
So you're okay
to the
with it being
media
there?
saying we are going to prove, and this is what in the present bill is trying to explain that. Because you see, the Constitution is very clear around the issues.
Promoting access to information.
Also, the Act I've referred to, the information legislation, is very clear around those specific areas. You see? What we are trying to do now, and we're saying, if there are areas around the unconstitutionality of this particular bill, we're here to listen to
But we're
and deal
saying-
with those specific. Which are they? Let them point
The
them
public
out.
interest clause, I'm not getting you on this one. The public interest clause, the media is saying, is unconstitutional for you to take it out. Put it back in. Would you be happy with doing that as the ANC?
We've been asking, what do you mean by the public interest clause? What do you mean by that? We've been asking throughout all these public hearings. What do you mean? Explain this particular area to us.
No, it's very simple. A public interest clause is a clause that you insert in the current bill that allows members of the media to publish whatever information they might have on issues that relate to security, if they are in a position to prove that the information they are putting out is of public interest.
Okay.
And that, of course, is different to saying that it is interesting to the public. Public interest has been defined very, very clearly.
Are you
That
happy with
public
that
interest
definition?
means that which serves public good. rather than that which is interesting to the public.
Would that work for you, sir?
And I'd add an example and say that for the Sunday Independent to expose corruption and crime intelligence and show that the people who work there are themselves a threat to national security, that serves the public good.
Okay.
No. We don't have a problem with this
Okay.
particular point. But
Let me ask you to hold that thought because we have to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to pick it up right there here on SABC3. Stay with us. And we pick it up on that very emotional issue of the right of the public to know. And I want to ask you this, Mr. Matila. Are you, as the NCOP, discussing this issue of that one clause that is the sticking point in this, the main sticking point in this bill? Are you discussing it? Are you looking at maybe possibly putting it back in there?
That is one of the key issues that we will be debating as a committee, because we have about 4 sessions to debate this particular matter. You know? And because, you see, we are looking at the interests of our society. And for making sure that we don't have a problem with some of the issues, because there are different interpretations from different role players, you know, organs of civil society, legal people and everybody else. They interpret this particular issue around the public interest differently, you see. Hence we said, show us a clear case and understanding. And hence I referred you to the Canada model, because that's what was brought to us. Because you see, what they do in most cases is when they read the Constitution, they read part of the Constitution that they think is good for them, and not read the entire Constitution. And that's the same thing they did when they read that particular legislation in as far as the Canada situation is concerned.
William, let's move on to something else. Can the media really self-regulate? Can we leave it to this industry to regulate itself and make sure that it puts its own checks and balances in place without the interference of the state?
Well, there already is, I don't want to call it interference, but depending on the media and broadcast media, there is ICASA, which regulates media. It determines various issues around license conditions. So it has a clear role to play, the state, certainly in terms of facilitating and promoting those things. Can the media on its own regulate itself? No. It needs public pressure, it needs citizen involvement, it needs its readership involvement, it needs its listenership involvement in order to help it ensure that it does a better job.
Okay.
If you don't get that active involvement, though, then you have a problem. Now, we need to acknowledge that the ANC, from its initial calls of potentially jailing journalists, fining them, very extremist positions about that were very punitive and very anti-democratic, they've moved to a position where they're now saying, you know what, we want an independent, some kind of an independent mechanism. And we don't yet know what that thing looks like. What is clear, though, from all the evidence available internationally, is that you need to be very, 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 very cautious about any kind of state involvement when it comes to things that may interfere with editorial content.
Makoto, you mentioned earlier the Press Freedom Commission and the report that they're going to table. There's been some criticism to the commission itself that, they can't really enforce anything, and therefore, even if we say we're leaving it to SANEF or the Press Commission or whatever to regulate the industry, there's very little they can do.
No. I think the issue for me is not what the commission can do. See, we must remember that the commission was put together in order to investigate the problems that we have. It was put together by Print Media SA and some other structures.
Yeah.
Now, once they release their report, the commission dissolves. We must wait for the report from the commission, which will then spell out how they think we should move forward in terms of whether it's an independent regulation or there's some other form of regulation that they investigated and applied themselves to.
But don't you concede that, or do you concede that at some point we need more punitive measures for the industry if they do get things wrong, over and above saying, just public retraction on the front page, but to say it's maybe going to cost you if you get it wrong, it's going to do something else, so that you get the ANC and other parties that are saying you're irresponsible quite happy?
No, no. You know, there are no absolute positions. I think people must debate what is acceptable. You know, if you say
All
that.
right.
You know, it must cost newspapers. How are you going to determine the cost?
Okay.
Newspapers vary in terms of their size and.
Okay, I've
What
got
they
one
can
final
afford.
words from you, sir.
Maybe one slight point. You see,
Yeah.
in one of the public hearings, a former senior journalist of the City Press gave us a scary picture around what is happening in the history, in this particular industry, the ownership, the editorial team, and all those things. It was very scary, and it was in a public hearing where we got all this information. You see, if the ownership is not in South Africa,
Okay.
who do they account to?
All right, we're going to have to leave it there, gentlemen. Thank you so much. We've run out of time, but thank you for coming through to talk to us about this issue. Clearly an emotional one, and clearly one that is going to be with us for a little while to come. But that's how we come to the end of the program tonight. Thank you so much for your contribution. To join us again next week for Interface. Good night.